The day I moved in, a woman with a clipboard told me I needed permission to park in my own driveway, and 20 minutes later, there were sirens because I didn't follow hers. That's the hook right there. You think you're doing the quiet, sensible thing, and suddenly someone else's paper rules your life. So yeah, welcome to my week with Karen. I still remember the truck humming low as the road narrowed, that slow inhale before a place decides whether it will keep you or spit you out. I had the keys in my pocket, the deed in a folder, the crew unloading boxes like a small polite invasion, and the lake lying calm like it didn't care. I'd pictured this drive 100 times, quiet, easy, a place to put my life down without a committee breathing over it. And then Karen showed up from nowhere, clipboard folded like a weapon, and told me I needed authorization for my move-in. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask my name. She measured my truck with her eyes and announced that the lakefront properties had specific requirements: parking alignment, access windows, coordination with board representatives. It was all said in the voice people use when they're delivering an obvious fact like the weather or a bill you already know you owe. I told her calmly that I owned the property. That didn't register. Ownership, she explained, didn't exempt me from procedures. That was the first time I learned the difference between written rules and practiced rules. The first time I felt the shape of an authority that lived in habit and habit alone. She made a note, dialed a number, and 15 minutes later a patrol car rolled in. The officers were polite. The officer asked for proof of ownership as if we were at a DMV, and ownership was a social courtesy. And when I handed over the folder, he said the magic words I'd be repeating for weeks. "This appears to be a civil matter." He left. Karen stayed, clipboard smug and hand message delivered. Then the notices began. Not aggressive, sterile, polite, careful. Obstruction of shared access, unapproved temporary structure, lawn conformity, landscape violations. Each one a thin paper footprint that marked a presence. No photos attached, no immediate fines, just language arranged to make it feel official. I started collecting them in a folder because small things add up if you don't account for them. You start to notice patterns when someone decides to make procedure their weapon. Karen walked the edge of my property like she owned the air along it. She rolled a measuring wheel along gravel, took photos of trampled grass, planted little flags where no survey had been done. Notices kept arriving, all citing different subsections, none clearly connected, fragmentation as a strategy. The point wasn't a single violation. The point was wait. That's when I did the boring, quiet thing people rarely do till they're backed into a corner. I read my deed. I sat at the kitchen table with the house quiet around me, and I read the dense, exacting language of boundary lines and water lines and bearings. North boundary 117.2 feet. Eastern boundary 94.7 feet into the water line following the original 1979 shoreline contour. There it was, in ink stamped and signed, a clear survey that included my lot all the way to the shoreline. No dotted easements, no shared path labeled across my parcel. The trail Karen kept pointing to existed as habit, not as law. Discovery changes the game. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. It feels like someone turned on a light where you'd been squinting, but it rearranges everything. Once I had the plat map and the stamped survey, the notices started looking like noise. I took pictures, photocopied archives, logged dates and actions, and I built a timeline. If she wanted paperwork, I would give her paperwork back, neat and legal and boring as hell. You'd be surprised how unglamorous victory looks when it's mostly persistence and a binder. I spent an afternoon at the county building surrounded by cinder block walls and humming vending machines unfolding plat maps that smelled faintly of dust and history. Lot 3, Block 9, the curve of the cove, all of it matched my deed. I took photos with scale marks and dates. I printed tax records, pulled aerials from the 90s, and watched how the shoreline had been recorded for decades without a single dotted line for some imagined shared access. Once I had the record, procedure stopped being an invisible tide and started looking like a stack of papers I could balance. I wrote back to the HOA in the same tone Karen used: calm, factual, attached exhibits. Allegation: unauthorized storage. Response: no structure present. Allegation: obstruction. Response: photographic evidence of legal parking. I certified mail it, I keep copies, I add tabs, I stop arguing, I present. And of course she escalated. Karen moved the issue into process, a hearing board review, a parade of polite form letters. She made the problem look procedural so it would feel inevitable. The trick in that room was presentation, make the concern look reasonable enough that no one bothers to check. That's the subtle power of procedure. People who like order will defend the appearance of fairness before they check the facts. The hearing itself was antiseptic folding chairs, bottled water nameplates, the kind of room that makes you want to behave. I brought a binder, county-verified plats, stamped surveys, my deed a timeline. I didn't raise my voice. I showed the survey. I pointed to the line where the trail crossed my parcel, but no easement existed, and I let the silence between facts do the work. The board took it in, conferred, and the first cracks appeared. One of their legal advisors, a man in a suit with a yellow pad, said a sentence that felt like air clearing. Lack of filing means the HOA doesn't have legal standing to regulate movement across that parcel without owner consent. Hearing that was the pivot. Not melodramatic, not thunderclap. Just a clarification handed over the table that rewired authority use is not the same as right. The gate, the welded steel barrier they installed at the slope, the zip-tied, authorized access-only sign became an object that could no longer hide behind habit. When I called the county to ask if the HOA had filed any new access modifications, the clerk's answer was blunt, nothing on record. Once that was on paper and said aloud in a room with witnesses, the process began to unravel. The board quietly agreed to pause enforcement pending policy review. The HOA's outside counsel began exploratory conversations about jurisdiction. The gate disappeared without a grand apology, like a guilt-ridden cover-up left to be noticed only by the grass. The newsletter buried a short procedural sentence in the middle of a gardening bulletin. Board affirms enforcement authority does not extend to shoreline parcels without recorded easement. No fanfare, no mea culpa. But it was there. It's not a Hollywood I win moment. No dramatic unveiling, no triumphant speech. The satisfaction is quieter neighbors walking the path again, some hesitant, some not. The shoreline unobstructed, the record intact. Karen still comes to meetings, clipboard replaced by a folder smaller in the room because the facts are no longer pliable to her memory. The gate is gone. The notice is stopped. The lake sits where it always has, honest and indifferent. So what did I learn? A few things worth saying out loud. Systems work only as far as people let them. Assumptions can be weaponized into authority if they go unchallenged. And the one thing that bends procedure is proof. You can shout at bureaucracy until your voice goes hoarse, or you can build the precise, boring file that makes it impossible to pretend the world is otherwise. Evidence is slow and steady, not glamorous, but it lasts. There's a moral tucked in there. I didn't expect to feel justice often looks like paperwork and patience. It's not melodramatic revenge. It's endurance. It's showing up with facts when everyone else prefers the comfort of a story they already know. If you have to choose between being right and proving you're right, pick the proof. It will outlive tempers. And here's a small, messy truth. Justice isn't always loud, and winning doesn't always feel like conquering. Sometimes it's just being able to walk your shoreline without feeling like you have to apologize for owning it. Sometimes it's watching someone who thought their certainty was power learn that certainty needs a legal base. That's the satisfying part. Not that she was humbled, but that the record settled the argument, not personality. So I'll leave you with this question. What would you do if someone tried to rewrite the rules where you live? Would you start a folder or start a fight? Drop your take below, or better yet, tell a story. Have you ever had to prove something ordinary was actually yours? Share it. Maybe someone else needs the courage to get their maps out and read their deed.